I'm not ashamed to say it. I think you are the most perfect puppy in the world. Oh yes. Let's talk perfect albums. I love you, girlies. Fellow Kiss fans, welcome to It's All For You Demons, celebrating the fun of being a Kiss fan. And tonight,
alright,
I know lately, December, we talked about Dynasty for 4 weeks straight, and then we kind of went into January also talking about Dynasty, and we talked about Japan a lot with Dynasty. So I thought tonight we would break the mold completely and talk about something completely different, and that is a perfect album. Now, I used to collect vinyl all the time, bought every record I loved as a kid, bought it on vinyl, and then one day I was like, what am I doing here? The focus is only going to be on Kiss. So now my days at the record store are very short. I walk in, check the Ks, check the new arrivals, and I'm out. But the other day I was going through all of my records, and this is this is going well. Going through all of my records, and I thought, of all this vinyl, from Bryan Adams to ZZ Top, what is the most perfect record in this mix? And once I determined that, does Kiss have a perfect record? So that's what we're going to talk about tonight. Perfect albums. What is the perfect album in my vinyl collection? And does Kiss have a perfect album? And after all that, she finally chills out. When selecting what I consider to be the perfect album, I didn't even really choose an album from my collection. I do own this album, owned it on album, cassette, CD, everything. But I looked at everything I've ever known my entire life. I grew up, my mom was a huge Beatles fan, especially the early days, 63 to 66. I know that stuff like the back of my hand. My dad was big into the Beach Boys, the Doors. Danny was big into U2, jazz, Elvis, Led Zeppelin. I've got a lot of exposure to all of that stuff from Dan, and then stuff I picked up on when I was a kid, Rick Springfield, Quiet Riot, Motley Crue, Van Halen, and then of course Kiss again with Dan. I am leaving Kiss out of this because we will discuss if Kiss has a perfect album, but my choice for the most perfect album ever made, it would be this, 1983's Motley Crue, Shout at the Devil. From beginning to end, there is no low point on this record. I first heard this record when I was 10 years old. My best friend, Sean Wiley, down the street, got it for his birthday on cassette. We went out to the woods behind his house with a boom box and like 6 Duracell batteries, and we played that cassette tape. And I know this sounds cliche, but it was dangerous. I was in the 4th grade, and it just felt like I should not be listening to this, and that felt good. Add in that imagery, and a 10-year-old kid, I was hooked. I was already into Quiet Riot, so I already kind of liked heavy metal, if you want to call it that. And then once I saw Nikki Sixx, that was it. He was like a superhero to me. Combined with the kick in the balls guitar riffs of this record, it was just like a dark, fiery, heavy metal nightmare that I loved to live inside. And being 10 years old, fascinated by the larger-than-lifeness that existed on MTV, and rock bands just looked cool, Motley Crue looked the coolest. And this record, to this day, does not sound dated. And it is just badass. And it has remained badass since 1983. The one kind of bummer track on this record, I would say Helter Skelter I can probably do without. I loved it as a kid, but as an adult, not really too much into it. Even the order of the songs on this record, starting with In the Beginning and that voiceover and those demonic sounds, puts you in this atmosphere of kind of hellish fire. And then you end with Danger, and it just has that wonderful Hollywood sleaze that doesn't exist in many records. The song Shout at the Devil, Looks at Kill, 10 Seconds to Love, Red Hot, Too Young to Fall in Love. The drum intro of Too Young to Fall in Love is enough to make any red-blooded American boy or girl want to form a band. And that's what they did to us when we were little. We formed a living room lip sync band. And I promise you, it was mainly because of Motley Crue. I played a tennis racket, a white tennis racket with a black leather grip as my guitar. And I remember finding sticky letters. And I put my name on the handle of that guitar. And it was because of Nikki Sixx having Nikki written on his fretboard during the Theater of Pain period. Shit, probably the reason I still spike my hair today is all due to this record. 100% the most perfect album to ever exist, the most perfect album to exist in my vinyl collection, and I would not be the Kiss fan I am today had I not been introduced to Shout at the Devil when I was 10 in Sean Wiley's backyard. And that's the lovely impact Motley Crue has put on my life, our lives, anyone in our generation. They gave us dreams, they gave us nightmares, and it all started, for me, with this album. Thus, the most perfect album in the world from beginning to end, 1983's Shout at the Devil. And now for the big question of the night. Does Kiss have a perfect record? And at first, I don't know why, Lick It Up came to mind, and I thought, is Lick It Up a perfect record? And I have to say no. And I love him to death, and I don't mean any ill will when I say this, but you go past 1977 and you always end up with kind of a corny Gene Simmons song on a record. But going from the status of being a perfect record, I think Gene Simmons kind of misses the mark. 77 on, 76 Rock and Roll Over. I think he still kind of had it. And then, people will hate me for saying this, but I think when you hit 77 and he made Plaster Caster, it just kind of got cheeseball after that. And then in the 80s, we all know he wasn't paying attention to Kiss, and so a lot of the 80s stuff is trash because of Gene Simmons. And I love the 80s stuff, so it's very hard for me to say that. I'm a huge 80s fan. Hot in the Shade, burned into my heart. Hot in the Shade for me is just a given. I love Hot in the Shade like I love my dogs. That's a given. But Makeup Period, Dynasty, obviously one of my favorite records because I don't skip a track. Rock and Roll Over, the ball buster of them all. But my pick for the most perfect Kiss record, the debut record. I know it doesn't sound like the perfect record, but man, you look at those songs, you look at their age, you look at their naivety of the New York scene at the time. They were young, they were fresh onto this scene, they wanted to form the band that they had always wanted to see. And you talk about hitting a ball out of a park. Strutter, Deuce, Black Diamond, 100,000 Years. Even Let Me Know. Let Me Know is such a great rock and roll song. And you add those trade-off vocals. It was the perfect storm. Ace's guitar playing. Peter's drumming. Gene and Paul's writing. To this day, most of these tracks are played live in set list. There's really nothing else you can say. I know the sound quality is not the best. If you gave this album to somebody who didn't like Kiss, they would hear it and be like, eh. But it's the quality that's on this record. The songwriting, the hanging your balls out there, rock and roll. These were young guys destined to be rock stars, and every track on this record proves that. Much like Motley Crue, from beginning to end, the most perfect Kiss record. And I love the cover. I love the glittery logo. I think back to when I was 15, listening to this on cassette and just loving the fact that I was a Kiss fan. And I think the innocence of this recording, The fact that it doesn't sound polished, it doesn't sound studio worthy, good, amazingly produced record, that lack of quality actually makes this a perfect record. Listening to this on a Walkman my freshman year, staring at this tape cover, it felt good to be a Kiss fan. It felt good to be able to go back and start at their journey and collect the entire catalog. And this is one of the cassettes I always return to, and it was because of those songs, those classic Kiss songs that are part of the Kiss DNA. They are part of the Kiss bloodline. They are part of Kiss history, and this is the most perfect Kiss album, 1974's debut, Kiss. Pee-wee says, I was raising hell during your intro, during your outro. I'm nice and chill. The most perfect Kiss record, Pee-wee. What do you think? She doesn't think anything. She wants to go Pee-wee herself. Thank you for hanging with us tonight. Thank you for waxing a little rock and roll nostalgia with us here in the Wax Night Basement. There's Larmar. Everyone is snoozing. Thank you for hanging with us. Take care, be safe, be good to your babies. Spay, neuter, microchip. We will talk to you soon.